A customer keeps telling a story to try and get money from a company, but the details aren't matching up. So when she starts making demands, this worker calls her bluff and watches as it all quickly falls apart. An unkind boss makes things harder and harder for the cleaners at his hotel. Finally, they decide they've had enough. What do they do to pay him back? When his dad sets what he considers an unfair curfew, this teenager is frustrated until he figures out a way to still obey his dad's rules, but also get what he wants. How do our heroes get their revenge while still complying with the rules? You'll only find out by watching this episode of VoiceyHere's Malicious Compliance. This story was called Reimburse Me or the Police Will Get Involved. Okay then, let's get the police involved. So I work in customer support for a mobile network provider. The way our company works is that after training, you enter a 1-month testing period where you answer phone calls under close supervision. At the end of the testing period, they either let you go or transfer you to a permanent position on one of the teams. I was a few days away from the end of the testing period when I get one heck of a phone call. I spent more than an hour on that one. It hurt my final score at the end of the month. The customer told a tall tale about how when she was trying to pay her debt to the company, she racked hundreds of shekels worth of debt in unincluded uses. The sales representative was rude to her and refused to let her pay, so she took a picture of him and left. The reason the call took so long is because she kept telling the story out of order, adding and changing details and going on tangents and rants. It was very difficult to get the story straight. I felt like a detective trying to piece together the clues into what actually happened. Every time I read the story back to her chronologically, she added or changed something in the middle, or went on a tangent about how she's a polite British woman, and we shouldn't hire people like that representative to represent our company. Eventually, I got her to settle down on a version of what happened. I looked through the records and saw that according to the representative, who was a lot more concise than her, she was the only one being rude, yelling at him in English, a language he barely spoke, and taking his picture without his consent. I didn't tell her that, I just politely instructed her on how to pay her debt via the phone. She sounded nervous. I told her that until the debt is paid, I cannot make the changes in the account, including adding a report. So reluctantly, she gave me her credit card details and the debt was paid in full. I reported on what she told me and moved it along to my superiors. A few days later, my testing period was over, and despite that tragedy of a call, I aced it and got transferred to the illustrious email department, which is what I wanted. It's much more chill here, and I can work at my own pace, not having to rely on the customer or the supervisor to work faster. Also, I could take my breaks whenever I felt like it. Everything is fine for a couple of weeks until I received an email telling a familiar tale. It was an enraged recounting of the same story I heard on the phone, except much more elaborate, with more details I never heard before, such as the involvement of another person, or that the representative assaulted the customer by trying to impede her exit from the store. The customer complained that she's been cheated and expected the representative to be fired. But she saw him again at the store and was outraged. She was under the impression that her paying her debt meant we will listen to her and fire the representative. The email ends with the following demands: fire the representative, reimburse her for the money we stole from her under false pretenses, apologize to her in the form of extra compensation, and a personal phone call from a high-ranking manager. If we do not comply, the police will get involved. So I complied with the second part, and we got the police involved. You see, while reading the email, I noticed that the address she emailed us from had a different surname than her account or the credit card information that she provided. And lo and behold, the email was actually her real name, while the other details were fake. Turns out indeed that she was a polite British woman. A British woman overstaying her visa for over a year that was now using a fake identity in Israel. How's that for false pretenses? As we discovered later, she was also wanted for numerous accounts of fraud where she didn't pay for services or claimed compensation for stories that later turned out to be false, just like she tried to do with us. We called the police, but they couldn't find her since the physical address she registered on our site was also fake. So we called her back to the store to apologize personally. She gladly obliged. The police were waiting for her. Neither I nor the representatives she implicated were there that day. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the look on her face. She was fined a hefty amount and then deported back to the UK. This is the thing I don't understand with these people, is they continually fail to fly under the radar. Like, you know, if attention is drawn to you by the police, you could get deported. So why on earth would you threaten to call the police? This story was called, "If you don't like it, then leave. Don't mind if I do. Don't mind if we all do." I worked as a housekeeper at a small local hotel. At the beginning, when I started, about 3 years ago, things were pretty peachy. I got above minimum wage and worked in an environment with a more relaxed working pace. We had more time than your average hotel to clean rooms, and it showed in customer satisfaction. We had stellar reviews, with customers raving about how there wasn't a speck of dust anywhere, how everything from the lampshades to the bathroom drain was always scrubbed squeaky clean. I loved my job and took pride in it, and when we had extra time, which happened from time to time, we would do some deeper cleaning, like scrubbing all the walls inch by inch, disinfecting the whole bathroom, cleaning the blinds, etc. Even though we all had some extra time, we used it to make sure the rooms were always up to a very high standard. As a result of this, we got a reputation of being an affordable but very clean hotel. So our popularity spiked. But even before we got so popular, in our prime we were booked full about 90% of the days. Our boss made a pretty nice amount of money. We don't have a reception. We're self-service. You just get a passcode for your room via text message, so he saved money with that. He drives an expensive car and seems very well off. We were never struggling financially. Then things started changing. We're a very close-knitted team of cleaners who have been in the house for years. A couple of us left at the end of last year. One moved to another state. Another became a housewife after having a kid, and we started expecting newcomers to our team. They never came. Our boss claimed that it's hard to find workers for this kind of job. We never had anyone interviewed, and I never saw ads anywhere that we're hiring. So I'm not sure he was even planning on replacing them. So our workplace got tighter. We managed somehow, but there was no longer time for thorough cleaning. Then the boss opened a restaurant so that the guests could have breakfast. Cleaning it daily got added to our workload. And that place is massive. It takes at least 1.5 hours to clean daily. At the same time, he also opened a separate Airbnb style apartment, 3 bedrooms, kitchen, living room and bathroom, for larger groups who wanted to reside together. Cleaning that fell on us as well. So suddenly we were down 2 people. There were 7 of us initially, and shoved 2 massive new responsibilities. We asked our boss again to hire more people, but he said no, and that we've been having it too easy beforehand. He also refused to add another hour or 2 to our daily working hours. Currently 9 AM to 3 PM. We have 6 hours and everything needs to be done at 3 PM, sharp, because that's when the new passcodes start working. Understandably, we were stressed out. There was suddenly far too much to do, and our boss also simultaneously expected that we would keep up our usual cleaning standard. But when our time per room plummets from 45 minutes to 25 minutes tops, usually closer to 15, obviously we're not able to clean everything the way we did before. We would get yelled at when we got bad feedback because there wasn't enough time to clean thoroughly enough. Customers who came in after our clean rooms were disappointed and took their business elsewhere. Also, my coworkers started calling in sick because they were burnt out. It was a mess, but our boss maintained the outlook that if he pushed a massive amount of work on us, we'd somehow magically find an extra pair of hands and get everything done 100%. Last week, we had a meeting with my co-workers. We discussed the current situation, and to my surprise, everyone was considering quitting. Out of loyalty to our long-time employer, the 5 of us agreed to have a meeting with our boss and tried to persuade him to hire more staff to bring the hotel back to its earlier standard. A couple of days later, we had the said meeting. Our boss was still in denial and said that we just need to up our pace and do things faster. He cited that most hotels give housekeepers about 20 minutes to do everything. We pointed out that it's true, but in that case, he can't expect us to clean better than those hotels. He scoffed and told us, "If you don't like working here, then leave." That's all we needed to hear. That night we had another meeting amongst us cleaners. We checked our contracts and realized there was no agreed on notice for resignation, as we're at will. So, we were all going to take his advice. This morning at 9 AM sharp, the 5 of us paid our boss a visit. The look on his face when we simultaneously slammed down our resignation letters and marched out, leaving no one to clean the whole hotel today, will warm my heart for the rest of my days. He was absolutely stunned. He tried to call us to talk things over. Nuh-uh, we just did what you told us to do. Have fun replacing what was a motivated, loyal, and dedicated team of cleaners who made your business bloom. Everyone has experienced this to varying degrees, where you understand the value that it is that you provide, but your boss doesn't recognize or appreciate it. Now, if the cleaners didn't communicate to their boss the problems and concerns they had, well then they would only have themselves to blame, because the boss can only see the big picture, he can't see the specific details. But they tried continually, and he still wouldn't listen. So in the end, the only one who was to blame was the boss. This story was called, "And This Is Why I Love My Boss." This just happened last night. I work at a small mum and pop pizza place in a small town. We're the only non-gas station pizza place in town. Friday nights get busy. So my boss is cooking and I'm waitressing. The cook cooks and the waitress does everything else. It would be nice to have 2 of us, but we manage and the people of our town expect it and respect it after all these years. It's busy. I've got several tables and the phone has been ringing off the hook with to-go orders. I've got piles of dishes. Someone is constantly at the register and food is constantly ready to go out. My customers are being great. Everyone is smiling and laughing and not worried that things are taking a bit longer than a Tuesday night. It was busy, but not stressed yet. Then he calls. Some guy from out of town. There was a high school game, so we had a few out-of-towners that night. He orders a large, thin crust. Our thin crust is very thin. About as thin as a cracker crust, but it's not crispy like that. Pizza with pepperoni. Easy peasy. He wants it well done. Can do. He wants us to put it in the oven for an extra 5 minutes. I say, okay, with zero intention of doing that. We have a brick oven. Our thins go in the oven for 3 to 4 minutes. 4.5 for well done. That's total. This guy wants 5 extra minutes on top of that. He wants a 16-inch charcoal hockey puck. I assume he thinks he knows what he's talking about, and just put on the ticket, well done. We do our thing. His pizza looks beautiful. He comes to pick it up and before paying, he opens the box to inspect the pizza. This is normal and I'm not worried. I asked for my pizza well done. This is how we make our pizzas well done. Any more than this and your pizza will burn. I'm not paying for this. I'm not eating this. I want a new one and I want it how I ordered. Put it in for 5 more minutes. At this point, my boss taps me on the shoulder and tells me to take over the cooking while he handles the customer. Our kitchen abuts the register counter. I'm literally making pizza 5 feet away from the interaction, so I get to hear the whole thing. My boss tries to tell the guy how long we usually cook the pizzas, what's going to happen to this pizza, etc. Customers having none of it. He wants this pizza cooked, and the normal time, plus an additional 5 minutes. After a few minutes, I can tell my boss has had enough of this guy. You sure you don't just want this pizza? Meaning the one we've already made. Guy says no, so boss brings it out to one of our regulars and let him have it. He comes back to the guy and informs him that if he wants his cooked for 9 minutes, he needs to pay first. Guy seems satisfied and pays. I hop back to waitressing and boss takes over cooking and making this guy's pizza. It goes in the oven looking beautiful. Boss sets the timer for 9 minutes and makes sure to show the guy the timer. He just smiles and chuckles a little. I'm bussing tables and checking people out and answering the phone while we wait on this guy's pizza. The timer goes off for his pizza. Guy comes closer to the counter. It's my job to cut the pizza as soon as the boss man puts it in the box. He lifts this solid black, hard as charcoal hockey puck out of the oven and sets it in the box. You can barely tell it's a pizza anymore. I attempt to cut it, but it's so overcooked, it more or less just cracks and crumbles. My back is to him, so I can't see his face, but I can imagine. I close the box, turn and hand it to him, with a smile on my face. "Enjoy your pizza, sir." The guy stutters a bit.
"Oh, I can't eat that."
"We made your pizza to order. If you want a new pizza, you'll need to order a new one and pay for that." The guy has this completely broken look on his face. I was actually almost looking forward to a blow up. My boss is a force to be reckoned with if you curse or disrespect us. He left his pizza on the counter and left. This is why I love my boss. We had a story about a bad boss, now we have a story about a good boss. You know, it's all balances out in the end, right? That's what's so beautiful about malicious compliance. You're giving people exactly what they want. It's like they're serving themselves the justice that they deserve. And the great thing is you just get to let it all happen. It just happens by itself. It's amazing. This story was called "Dad Gave Me a 2 AM Curfew. I Complied." When I was about 16 or 17, like any other kid at that age, I desperately wanted to go to a party all my friends went to. All of my friends were older than myself, so they had no curfew or were allowed to stay very late. My dad, however, was a pain in the butt at the time. Or at least, that was my perception. He wouldn't let me go anywhere, and when I was allowed to go, he'd give me ridiculous curfews that held no account with the nature of the event. Example, going to the movies at 8, but demanding to be back home at 10. That kinda limits your choices, right? And you don't want to be that friend who puts constraints onto the group. Sorry, I digress. Anyway, that particular day, I negotiated for him to give me a later curfew. After a while, he stated that 2 AM was the absolute latest I should be home. That sucked because most of my friends had a 3 AM curfew, and the party was at least a half an hour bike ride away. So that would mean I would miss more than 1.5 hours of the party. Yeah, severe case of FOMO here. I tried to negotiate some more, but then I realized what date it was. Enter malicious compliance. You see, it was the last weekend of October, on a Saturday. I don't think this is the same everywhere, but in the larger part of Europe, this means that daylight savings time ends at exactly 3 AM. Clocks are set back 1 hour. So I went to the party, not by bike. I asked for a friend to drop me off, make sure that I would be there exactly on time. I made sure that my dad didn't hear me a minute too soon, because then I would be almost an hour late. At exactly 3 AM, or better, 2 AM for the second time, I opened the door and got in. Needless to say, he was furious, demanding an immediate explanation as to why I was an hour late. When I said that I was exactly on time, pointing at his own radio-controlled watch, I could see his face turn all kinds of red, and an awesome mix of defeat and anger in his eyes. He sent me to bed, knowing I was right, and I complied, knowing I was very wrong. Nevertheless, it was an awesome victory. Maybe I'm just being a bit picky, but a 2 AM curfew seems pretty generous to me. However, I can't complain when somebody's smart enough to comply and find a loophole in the system. What about you guys? Did you or do you have a curfew? What was your curfew, and did you ever do anything sneaky like this to extend it, or slightly bend the rules? Let me know down in the comments below. If you'd like your story to be narrated by me, don't forget to visit the subreddit r/VoiceyHere, link below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Alright, I'll see you in the next one.